Hi and welcome to the second episode of the series and of the JA Malta podcast dealing with financial literacy. Today I have two new guests. I have Marisa Xuereb and Pulis. I will ask for them to introduce themselves soon. I'd like to start off by obviously thanking Finance Malta for supporting this initiative and also welcome you to follow the previous series we had on work readiness and the previous episode as well on financial literacy, as we will follow and continue discussing this topic with today Marisa and Sara. Could you just introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, hi Matthew, I'm Marisa Xuereb. I'm an economist by education. I've worked in manufacturing all my life up to now. More recently, I've also been involved as a non-executive director in telecoms and financial services. And I'm a mother of two teenagers.
Thank you. Sara?
Hi Matthew, thank you for the invite. I'm Sara Pulis. I'm the head of conduct supervision at the Malta Financial Services Authority. I'm a lawyer by profession. I've been working with the authority for the past 24 years now, so quite a long time. I'm also a mother of two kids.
We have that in common. We're all parents of two kids. As part of our tradition in these episodes, we start with a quick fire round to break the ice between us. I'll ask you some quick questions to choose from. Would you rather save or invest?
Invest.
Bit of both.
Would you have a side hustle or want to focus purely on your full-time job?
Full-time job.
I've always had a full-time job, but I've also had some side hustles on the side to keep me busy after hours. So.
And you work for money or you let money work for you?
I try to work for fun. Hopefully earn enough money to have money working for me too.
I try to make the money work for me whilst working for the money as well.
And you save for a rainy day or you save for a sunny day?
I always save for a sunny day.
Well, you have to save for both a rainy day and a sunny day, because sometimes sunny days can be even more expensive than rainy ones, I find.
And would you save money under the mattress or at the bank?
At the bank. At the bank.
Smart casual or business formal?
For me, smart casual is the preferred option.
I would prefer smart casual as well.
Smart casual. So, Sara, I'll start with you from also the perspective of MFSA, perhaps. There are certain metrics that we use to measure whether someone is financially literate. There is the PISA study, there's the OECD study. Are these the correct tools? Should we be doing something else to measure whether we're financially literate, and how's Malta doing?
Okay, no, as far as measuring is concerned, measuring is a very scientific practice, is a very scientific tool, so it needs to follow a very scientific process. It's not just putting your finger in the air and see where the wind is coming from. So yes, there has to be a disciplined methodology which needs to be followed. There has been, even for the purposes of the OECD survey and report, which was issued very recently, and the best tool for that was a survey amongst investors in Malta, targeting obviously a significant sample size, capturing different cohorts within the population. And you ask questions, different types of questions, addressing not just the knowledge of financial literacy, but also testing the attitudes and the financial behavior. Yes. So it's not just a question of, do you know what an insurance product does, or how would you invest, or we know what a bond is? That is just the knowledge. But I think it needs to also address issues like what are the attitudes. Today we are looking as well at digital literacy. And there were questions in the last survey, which was carried out by OECD, relating to, for example, digital savviness, which is becoming even more important, and as we go along cannot be extricated from financial literacy. The word is going on. In terms of the reports, the latest one which was issued, Malta was indicated as having a 68% financial literacy level out of a total of 100 in terms of the questions asked. So it's not too bad, but it's not too good. There is definitely a lot of room for improvement. So yes, I mean, going forward, yes, there will be additional surveys and scientific methods, and also trying to address the outcomes of those methods to target the cohorts which fare a bit less than
is there a particular cohort? If I put you on the spot, is there a particular cohort that was flagged as needing more attention?
Well, we tend to focus on the young ones because the saying goes, is catch them young, but we tend to perhaps not overlook or not address as much effort towards the elder generation. So for example, we see older generation struggling with digital apps, for example, or we see the older generation buying bonds and holding on to them, refusing or being afraid to trade because, if it goes bust or if the price goes down, I'm losing my money, so I'm not trading. So that limits as well, for example, activity on the Malta Stock Exchange.
Yes.
Makes it illiquid, you can't trade. So then it becomes a spiral, And the older generation is the generation which has the money now. They worked all their life for their money, and now they need to manage it to continue living their lifestyle. So I think we need to address those as well. Another aspect which I think we need to address, of course, both the younger ones and especially the elder ones, is the threat of scams, which are becoming even more rampant, unfortunately, and even more sophisticated. So today you get an SMS from your bank, you trust your bank, you click the link, and the next thing you know, your account is hacked by someone else. Is basically swiped clean. So we need to be careful. And there's as MFSA, we do these kind of awareness talks as well amongst different cohorts. We're starting one in schools soon, and we'll also address older generations with other stakeholders.
I mean, Marisa, Sarah mentioned already some effects, but from an economist point of view, and also a person who has been involved in various industries and obviously in contact with various businesses, how do you see the effect on the population, on the nation, on the country, if the situation or the population is not financially literate? What are the effects that we can see?
One of the effects is that there are a lot of dormant savings, particularly in the larger banks. There's a lot of deposits, and a good portion of them is not even earning interest.
Exactly.
And people think, okay, but this is safe. It's with the bank, it's safe. Fine, but it can be safe and earning some interest too. And the disadvantage of this, of having so much dormant savings stock in the country, is that you have a lot of projects which are viable from a business perspective, but which need to secure funding. You have a lot of companies that would like to go on the bond market, but are always a little bit hesitant. Will I be able
to raise the funds?
To raise the funds. Why? Because we have a lot of investors who are very cautious, who will only go for fully secured government bonds, for example. So having better literacy education, people who can understand, ask the right questions, diversify their portfolio so that their risk is spread over a number of different investments. Also, when they make an assessment of a company, of an investment, even if they are not themselves financial services practitioners, firstly, they look for advice from the right people. Secondly, they read the right background material. They see what is happening also in other countries where the companies they are investing in are trading. These are all considerations that a savvy investor would make. And these are things which don't happen so much. So a lot of local residents tend to go for the very safe bank deposit with a low or zero interest rate nowadays, or a government stock, or property. And that's the other side of the coin of having a population which is in general not very financially savvy. They would go for property. It's always considered a safe investment locally because we have a shortage of land. So the property market is always presumed to be able to retain the price over time because there's a limited supply. And this has also an impact on the environment in which we live, because all this construction happens because there is a demand for this kind of investment, for buy to rent, for example.
Yes.
And this has an impact on the daily lives of people. So if people had to be a little bit more financially savvy and diversify their portfolio and invest in other things, not just property, probably even the quality of life of people would be a little bit better.
And as you said, sort of the government bonds are always taken up quickly,
Yes.
but then if there's an equity issue, that's where we start struggling, even though there's a lot of savings in the banks.
Yes, and as Sarah mentioned, I mean, prices don't move on the bond market. It's very stagnant. And when there is a little movement, there's panic.
Exactly.
Whereas on the equity market, those kind of movements, if you see what happens in other countries, are very much day-to-day things. What goes up eventually comes down, and what goes down eventually comes up, and it's part of the cycle.
Yes,
of these kind of transactions. But of course, when you don't have an experienced cohort of investors and they're not that savvy, they panic immediately when the price of something goes down, for example.
Do you relate as well financial literacy or the lack of also with the issues of pensions, the dependency on state pensions?
Definitely.
Do you see a
Definitely.
clear correlation?
I mean, we are expecting that in this budget, I mean, I spent many years in the Malta chamber, a couple of them even as president, and during that time we started pushing together with the General Workers' Union. So it was the Malta chamber representing the employers and the General Workers' Union representing employees, pushing for a supplementary kind of pension for people who are in employment, where over the course of their working life they invest something more than just what they pay in social security contributions into a pension plan which would supplement their pension when they retire. Why? Because over time, pensions are becoming relatively smaller and smaller.
But employers, on the other hand, relate, usually they tell us that if employees were given a choice, should the employer invest in your pension or give you an increase or give you another perk?
Yes,
they
would opt for the perk.
short-term
I can
one.
tell you, I mean, years ago I tried to propose this to our own employees and they weren't excited about it.
Thanks for that. Just now to have a bit of a break from the discussion, and I'll ask still to link it with your personal experience. So Marisa, if you were now able to meet your 18-year-old self, what financial advice would you give an 18-year-old now, knowing what you know now through your experience?
Well, I think in those first, let's say, 10 years of my working life, because I started working when I was 18, I used to work and study at the same time. I spent a lot of money on things that I could have easily done without. And eventually you end up having to clear them up in boxes and so on, so they're no investment at all. So looking back, I could have spent less.
Consider your expenses better.
Yes, I mean a lot of overconsumption, I would say, of material things that you just buy to have there, whereas it would have made more sense to invest some of that money already then in a private pension, for example.
So look more for the future.
Yes, because although it's far away, when you start early with these kind of investments, you have an impact. I mean, starting a private pension plan when you're 50 is too late.
It's too late.
Okay.
Excellent. Sarah, a different lesson?
Not much. I mean, I was still a student when I was 18, so I didn't have much more than my stipend to treasure. But I used to be very careful to actually budget. I used to budget around and try to, as Marika mentioned, not overspend and remain within the budget.
Excellent.
So yes, I mean, enjoy life. I mean, don't just act as a skint, but within limits.
Excellent.
My point is, don't live beyond your means at that age. You don't need to keep up with the Joneses.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. Going back to discussion we were having, so we saw that it does have an effect on the national economy, on the society, even from an environmental point of view. So whose responsibility is it? So if we were to say the product service providers or the financial service providers are, is it their responsibility to educate their customers to offer products that are written in the language that people can understand?
I think in general, financial literacy is the obligation of everyone. It's everyone's responsibility. So, for example, as the clients out there, the general public out there, it's in your interest to ask questions and to dedicate time to financial literacy, to hear these podcasts, read, attend sessions, look up things, look up stuff on the internet. So you have to dedicate time,
for sure.
And you have to make the effort. So if a product provider offers you a document, you need to read it. If you don't read it, you need to ask. And I think that is the key. Financial literacy and financial capability enables the consumers, general public, basically to ask pertinent questions and to become exigent. And like that, you can actually, I think we as the consumers can actually push product providers to manufacture products which clients want, which offer good value to clients. From a regulatory perspective, there are already requirements requiring entities providing financial services to offer products which are in the best interests of clients.
Yes.
But if you have the client actually pushing and asking for particular features of particular products, the manufacturer will do worse than follow that trend, because the products would simply not sell.
So the customer will drive better quality of products.
Yes,
but
I believe so.
Are the service providers, Marisa, talking the language that people can understand, or do we keep it at a level? It's kind of also a bit of a power. Let's say people trust me because they not understand, so they trust me, so I'll manage to sell them something. Is there that aspect as well to it, do you think?
Financial service providers are regulated. Let's begin from that. So their obligations are clearly laid out by MFSA, and they have clear guidelines on what sort of information they need to provide to their customers. Having said that, when you are a technical person, when it's your profession, it's a very big challenge to explain some of those complex intangibles. And financial services, it has this particular feature. It's an intangible product. So it's harder to explain. Yes. It's very abstract. To explain them in terms that people can understand. I mean, we tend to be trained in a lot of jargon, and to explain that in a way that people can understand it is not always easy.
Yes.
But I think what is important is that people don't just take what the financial advisor gives them, but they read around it, particularly from people who are not financial advisors themselves, who can give you a different perspective of that particular investment, because you need that broad outlook to be able to make a good decision. Because one thing that is clear in financial advisors is that they would know their product very well. They probably have financial targets also, but they don't know you as a person as well as they know the product. So although they are obliged to ask a lot of questions to get to know you and to recommend an investment which suits your needs, I think you always need to do your own homework as well and not just go blindly. And something else that people tend to do is there are a lot of financial service products where you can revise your offering from time to time as part of the package. So you have a portfolio of investments and you can change that portfolio. And typically what people do is they start the policy and they forget about it. And they never look back and revise. Recently, I read a book. I would recommend it to everyone because it's not written in a technical manner. It's a very light-hearted kind of book. It's called Nudge, N-U-D-G-E, Nudge. It's written by two behavioral economists. And it gives a lot of examples related to pensions, related to insurance, to savings, how to make decisions that improve your future prospects. And it's written from the point of view of how to nudge people to make the right decisions. So it's more about like choice architecture, what policymakers should do so that people invest their money in the right way without imposing anything on them, but nudging them towards the right investments. But when you read it, it's a bit of an eye-opener of what you should be on the lookout for when you're having the conversation with your financial advisor.
Yes,
so I strongly recommend it.
Yes, I think that's very important, and I'll advise people to actually check out the book then and follow up after this podcast. Another issue that we're encountering now with maybe lack of financial literacy is the fact that things are becoming more accessible. So people nowadays can invest from their phones. There are apps that encourage you to invest, to buy this and that. There is content online, social media content that might not be good advice, but it's catchy, it's trendy, and might be also linking back to your argument about scams there, Sarah. So how, and I think you touched upon this, the digital skills with financial literacy and tackling this ease of accessibility. Are we doing enough, or should schools, should HR managers and development in companies do more? What can we do?
We are never doing enough. I mean, these people are always one step ahead. The scammers and the hackers of this world are always one step ahead. So we think we're up there and they're one step before us. So yes, we need to keep on pushing with the information and the eye-openers, so to speak. Today, as you mentioned, the new phenomenon of they're called finfluencers. So you get this young person on TikTok and on X and on social media, and they advertise, how easy for them it is to make money just by pressing a couple of buttons. It's very easy to be attracted to that. It's like free of charge. But we must never forget that if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And I think that's the baseline which we should keep in mind. No one gives you anything for free. So, but then yes, I mean, as I mentioned before, there's the allure of the instant gratification today as well, which plays a part over that. People who perhaps are easily convinced. So it's very important that, even you make certain checks. If you're looking at someone on the internet, see if that person is regulated. Not necessarily by the MFSA, because it could be regulated by another jurisdiction, which then offers services in Malta. There's a specific regime, or regulated at least in the EU. Don't just go by, he sounds nice, he sounds genuine, I'll obey. And I think that's the message which needs to be addressed. So yes, the more people who can push this message across, the more sound we make, the more take-up there will be.
Looking at it from an economist point of view as well, Marisa, the country, the authorities, the governments, should we be investing more into this? Therefore, if we're seeing all these consequences, if we don't have a financial literate country, should policymakers be doing more, or what can policymakers do to help with the situation starting from a young age, perhaps?
We definitely don't have enough material about financial literacy in secondary schools, for example. I think that is where we need to start, because children in their teens are already online. At 16, they start getting some form of income, whether it's through a job or a stipend or whatever. So they have their own bank account. They're kind of managing their own finances, and they are easy targets because they spend a lot of time online. A lot of these attacks happen online. In the past, you used to get cold calls from companies abroad telling you this is a really good investment, and they pester you and call every day. Now you don't get much of that, but you get a lot of these very attractive interfaces online, which kids very easily fall prey to, And you hear a lot about things like Bitcoin and all this, and the young ones take a liking to these things very quickly because they hear all the stories of the people who became rich overnight, these things, but they don't hear the stories of those who lost everything over something like that.
And we do see it in schools at a young age. They already have access to some junior account of something,
and
or
I think
they already
this
trade in
is
crypto.
very dangerous, and I think we need to have it in compulsory schooling, in secondary schooling, I mean, there's so much that these children are not taught. They start paying a NI and they don't know why they're paying it, for example. So it's very important that we introduce this topic into the the main curriculum, and not just, one session over the span of 5 years to tick a box. We have something about financial literacy. I think there are ways of teaching mathematics using examples from real life the financial world, and like that you're hitting two birds with one stone, and it goes on. I mean, when you see even national television, for example, for older audiences, because the young ones are not watching national television, but a lot of older people spend a lot of time in front of television, and there's so much that we can pass on to people sitting in front of the television for hours in terms of financial literacy. So there is a lot more that can be done. Also, on the front of ESG, we haven't mentioned it yet, but I think anyone who works in financial services knows that it's like the next big thing now. The banks, investments, green bonds, all this, everything is being directed into that area of ESG, of basically considering the environmental impact of the things you invest in, of having banks offer more favorable interest rates for those investments which are greener, so on and so forth. I think this is something that a lot of people still have not familiarized with themselves with as a concept, and it will shape future products. And if we don't have a population that is aware of these things, it will not look out for these things, and the transition to greener investments will be slower here than in countries where the consumer is aware.
And it also gives rise to greenwashing.
Of course.
We just label something as friendly or green, but in fact, if people don't question, they won't realize that it's just a facade to something which is more of the same. I'd just like to say also that what you're saying, it's actually music to our ears at JA. I mean, we're also embarking on teacher training, Marisa, to educate and really expose these concepts of how they can be taught within other subjects. So you mentioned mathematics, English, history, and this is where we need to go, because we can't keep adding more things on the curriculum, which is already...
we have to connect things better.
Exactly. So I'd like to start wrapping up this interesting conversation, although we can keep talking for hours on end. I thank you, Sarah, I thank you, Marisa. For me, a quick takeaway from this, apart from reading the book, is also that it is something that you need to look out for. Policymakers, schools, corporates need to do their bit, but also it comes from the individual's point of view that they need to learn and they need to be on the lookout, as this is a key factor that could affect their future. I'll also thank Finance Malta for supporting this and ask you to join us again for future episodes and to follow our social media, where we also expose certain new concepts, new content and material and information through our social media. So thank you once again. Thank you, Marisa.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you,
Good day.
Good day.